Welcome to Balanced Life with Debbie Carlin Boyle. Conversations connecting to a healthier you. The show that gives you all the latest and greatest health and wellness information to inspire you to live a life of balance and joy. Debbie Carlin Boyle is a health and nutrition coach, personal trainer, and fitness instructor who helps her clients live in balance with everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. Please welcome your host, Debbie Carlin Boyle.
Hello, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday afternoon. We're shooting a live show here in the spring on a Tuesday. I think it's the last Tuesday of, if I'm correct, it is the last Tuesday of April. So thanks for joining us. We're 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, whatever time you're joining us live, or if you're watching the show later. I thank you for being here and joining me today. I'm excited about the show today, so sit tight. If you've seen any of the promos, you know we're going to be talking about plant-based diets, so I really think there's going to be a lot of good, valuable information you're going to want to take in, so stick around. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit something about myself, so you could go to my website and look me up. My name is Debbie Carlin Boyle. I am a personal trainer, a fitness instructor, and a health and nutrition coach. And I call my company Balanced Life because I like to help people find alignment with all the things that we need that feed us in life, besides the food on our plate, which is we're going to talk about today, which is definitely the main thing that feeds us. But we have a lot of things that have to come together in order for us to have some success for longevity with quality. Because one of the things we want is to have joy in our life without being bogged down with any kind of diseases or fears that we are going to get sick. So we have ways to be preventable about that, and that's what I help people do. Find the things that are sort of lower on the totem pole and put them back up in alignment. And I work one-on-one, I do workshops, and I also do groups. So get a hold of me by going to balancedlifebydebbie, DEBI.com, and there you'll see all the ways that you can work with me and all the ways to reach me. And there's also a free gift there. So go there, check it out. I would love, love, love to hear from you. We'd also love for you to become part of this conversation of our show today. So in order to do that, and if you're listening live, you can call in, ask a question, make a comment, just get involved in the conversation. That's why I call it Conversations, connecting to a healthier you, because it's not just me and my guest, but it's you chiming in as well. So to call in, the number here is area code 323-524-2599. Again, it's 323-524-2599. Now, if you don't want to call in or you can't call in or you're watching post live show, you can go ahead to my Facebook page, which is Balanced Life by Debbie, Facebook. And there you can, under the show, make a comment or ask a question, and myself or my guests will get back to you post-show. So that way, you're still part of the conversation, even if you're not part of the live show. So you have all these kinds of options. You could do that on my Instagram as well, which is Balanced Life by Debbie. And will you just keep the conversations going? On my YouTube channel, if you're watching there, same thing in the comment section. I get comments sometimes 2, 3 years, 4 years after a show, just because some Google search sends you to my YouTube channel, and there it is. You see something, you listen to it, and you have questions. And we just keep the conversation going on and on. So there you have it. We want you to get involved. And like I said, I think you're really going to enjoy this show today. So I'm going to get on with the introduction. So the modern diet dilemma. Is it better to eat meat, go vegan, or something in between? What's right for you? For my guest today, there's nothing she loves more than diving into a colossal bowl of salad. Julieanna Hever is known as the Plant-Based Dietitian who has been in practice in the LA area since 2005. Julieanna has a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater from UCLA and a Master of Science degree in nutrition from Cal State Northridge, bridging her 3 biggest passions for food, performing, and helping people. As a registered dietitian, Julieanna has authored 7 books, including the brand new Choose You Now diet, The Health Span Solution, Plant-Based Nutrition, The Idiot's Guide, and Vegetarian Diet. Julieanna is also the host of the Choose You Now podcast. So let's get to it. Let's talk about going plant-based. So will you please welcome my guest, Julieanna Hever, to the show. Did I destroy your last name?
Yeah, but everyone does. It's Hever. It's okay.
It's Hever. Hever. And then I said
Hever,
he.
like forever.
I just got he. I just had he in my head after we talked about it. I apologize.
It's okay.
Hi. Welcome. I'm
Thank
so glad
you.
you're with me today and that you're with me live and that we can get people to become part of our conversation, even if it's not during the live show. There's so much to unpack and so much to talk about. But before we start with anything, and I can see you and I have a similar background. I also have a degree in theater arts.
No way.
Yeah, from college in the LA area where we grew up. It's so funny.
That's why.
I know.
Because the LA area makes that happen.
It does. It does. Everybody around us being in the industry. I want to hear about you. I want to hear where you were born, how you grew up, and where you went to school, which we just talked about. But basically, I want to hear the road that you took, why nutrition and why plant-based nutrition became such a passion of yours. And then, you've created this wonderful career around it. So start from the beginning, if you will.
I would love to. Thank you so much, Debbie. And it's such an interesting path that I could never have predicted looking forward, right? I grew up in LA. My mom says that I danced before I walked. And so, because I love to dance, I was in the dance world for a long time. And I spent many, many, many hours in front of the mirror. And one day as I was transitioning, you're sitting there in your leotard and your tights with all of your friends. And one day I was sitting there, I was starting to see like some little curves happening, as I'm standing in front of the mirror. But my dance teacher, who also was named Miss Debbie, but that's not you.
Of course she was.
She was across the hall, the dance floor, and I was standing there with my little dancer colleagues, and she called out, "Julieanna, cut out your snacks." And that was a really big turning point in my life that I had no idea was going to set me off on the trajectory in which it did.
Wow.
So I wanted to be swallowed up by the floor. It was so embarrassing.
It's bad.
But I didn't know what that meant exactly because I was still very young, preteen. But I started reading. And this is before the internet, of course, and not to age myself, but I read everything I could get my hands on. And one of the books I stumbled upon in like my teenage years was this book by John Robbins called Diet for a New America. And this book floored me too. This was another little seed that set me off on a whole other trajectory. And it was the first book connecting diet, the environment, your health, and the animals. And it was a game-changing book. And I just wanted nothing to do with that industry, but I didn't know what that meant. So I declared that I was cutting out animal products. And I didn't know what that meant. So I was eating the side dishes. I was eating whatever because I didn't really cook at the time. And my parents are like, "You're going to be a veg what? What do we do with that?" And I just kept trying to do it. But then my parents, as loving, wonderful parents as they were, they staged what I like to refer to as my intervention. And they enlisted our family friend who's a nurse, Kendra, and we all went out to a steakhouse where they ordered me a teriyaki steak with a pineapple ring on top. And I remember sitting there and she's telling me, "You're going to be deficient in protein and iron and B12. And I'm a little girl going, "Oh my gosh, that's really scary." But I'm looking at the steak thinking, once you know, you can't unknow. But I grew up eating animal products like most people. And so I eventually went back into normal and eating a normal diet. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, the vegetarians aren't dying off like flies. Like I'm not hearing that in the headline. So there has to be more to this story. So I kept reading and reading and reading. Fast forward, I was an actress in LA. I went to arts high school. And then finally I was 16. My parents let me have an agent finally. I was so excited. And at one point, an agent or my manager told me, "You need to lose more weight for the camera." And so they sent me to a trainer. And at this point, I wanted to be pre-med. I wanted to be an actress. But then I went to this personal trainer and I fell in love with personal training. And so I'm like, okay, forget acting. Or maybe I thought I would act on the side at first, but forget med school. I'm just going to do this. And then became a personal trainer. And as I was personal training, the first questions people asked me was, well, what should I eat? Now, I'd read a little chapter in my personal training handbook about nutrition, and I'd been studying it my whole life, but I wanted to know what I was saying because I felt that was a big responsibility to tell people how they should eat. And I knew how important it was. So I immediately went back to grad school at Cal State Northridge. And for the first time in my life, I loved school, got straight A's for the first time. I was so excited about this whole journey. And fast forward, finished grad school, had kids. And then when you have kids, you just sit around doing nothing. Just kidding. So I had stopped personal training at that point, and I started going back into the literature. And I'm like, okay, now I know where I can get my protein from. And I know where I can get my iron from, better source than from animals and plants. And I kept diving deep, deep, deep. So I finally made the transition. I went fully plant-based 18 years ago. Everything about my health changed, stuff that I dealt with my entire life. Like I had acne, the worst acne, no matter what I did. I had GI problems. I always had sinus infections all the time, went away. They were gone. So then as I transitioned into becoming a dietitian and working with patients and clients in private practice, and I started implementing this with them, I could not believe what I was seeing with the results. It was off the charts, nothing I had learned about in grad school or in my internship. This was not even possible. And that was it. Then I started writing books and TV, and everything came together. The acting came together because I had my own TV show and I speak all the time. And it just ended up being this amazing journey that all came together. And I'm very grateful for the work I get to do.
You landed where you were meant to be, is what it looks like to me, is that, I think there's a lot of arteries of things that we do in our life that can come together to the place where we belong. I was a television commercial producer for 30 years, but in 1996, I had such a passion for exercise and food, and I became a vegetarian the second I left and went away to college and got out of my parents' house. It was like I called myself a processed kid. I grew up in the worst way possible in a Jewish family with lots of sweets and lots of overeating and clean your plate, and everything was full of salt and butter and just not enough nutrients that you could get. So right away, I made the connection between eating really healthy, and I knew it had to be all plants, eat the rainbow of the plants, and getting away from all that heaviness that I grew up with. And it made me heavy too, so all of a sudden, I went away to college and I was on my own, and I had control over my own stuff. So I always, even though I got into the industry, always in the back of my mind, that health and wellness stuff, what you eat, you are sort of what you eat, because I saw it work on me. And also my passion for fitness once I started becoming an athlete and playing tennis just overtook me. And then before I knew it, I was a certified spin instructor and a personal trainer. And as you can see, I still do it to this day at 65 years old. So it's a huge passion of mine. But it became bigger for me I was selling a lot of like McDonald's and fast food commercials. I was producing all those things. And I just thought, this is a great way to make money, but I'm really just feeding people terrible things. And my mission is to do good for people, not to make a lot of money just out of selfishness. So anyway, it's funny how things turn and go from right to left and left to right, and before you know it, you land on the bullseye. And so I can see with you that's exactly what happened, and you've been very successful at it, and I'm really, really impressed. I think it's just wonderful.
Thank you, Dick. I'm kind of blown away with how much we have in common, by the way. Even your upbringing. We could go hang out because it's so interesting how our journeys have been very, very similar. Yeah,
and we do live close to each other. So we're going to have coffee at our favorite coffee place on the lake, and that we'll talk about off camera. But that's going to happen, and see even more coincidences, I'm sure. I want to break it down. I want to get into because plant-based seems to be more of a new word than vegan or vegetarian, or does it encompass, like, how does it break down? Who's what? There's a pescatarian, there's a vegan, there's a vegetarian. There's so many different names now for being maybe partially plant-based, fully plant-based. You can eat dairy, you can't eat dairy. Will you break down the definitions for the audience for us?
Yes, Debbie, I would love to. So it turns out my first book, the Plant-Based Nutrition Idiot's Guide, they hired me to write the complete Idiot's Guide to Vegan Nutrition. And I didn't like that word because I'm a dietitian. My expertise is nutrition. I don't want to get into all the ethics of it because that's not my expertise, even though I did start this whole process for the animals, which is kind of funny, but it doesn't matter. But I changed the title of my book. And it turns out, I think my book was the first cover that had plant-based nutrition on the title. I'm the OG plant-based dietitian, they like to call me, because it was a new thing. Now the term is coined by Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who wrote the China Study in Whole, brilliant nutrition researcher that shifted his thinking based on what he learned, like a true scientist. So whole food plant-based came from him, and he mentored me a little bit at the beginning of my career. I mean, I think he's extraordinary. But that's kind of how that term came out. And when I was writing that first book, I like to say that when you say vegan, it's an exclusive definition. By definition, it means I do not use animal products. But okay. I wanted to use whole food plant-based because it's an inclusive definition, meaning I eat a diet based on whole plants. And I further elaborate what I love to say to make this so easy, because I don't like to get caught up in the semantics or the details, or definitely without judgment, because I'm all about like, just eat more plants and get as healthy as you can. There's no judgment. You don't have to be, perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. So I like to say, just eat a diet based on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in infinite tasty combinations. Eat more plants. Like you said, I always say too, eat the rainbow. And that's the way I like to look at it, because it's really intimidating for someone who grew up like we did, eating everything, to all of a sudden think, oh, I have to be completely perfect, and I can't even have honey, and I can't even have that. And I understand there's people that do it, and I have a lot of respect for people that do it for the rest of their lives or whatever. But it's more inclusive to tell people, and the research supports that the more plants you eat, the healthier your diet normally is, the more whole plants that you eat. The results are incredible. Like it's the only diet, a whole food plant-based diet is the only diet ever to show in a reversal of advanced stage cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. It's associated with decreased risk for hypertension, hyperglycemia, high cholesterol. It's unbelievable. So, and people get off their medications. So when I was in grad school and internship, they taught me, as a healthcare provider, when someone's on a medication, your role is to help avoid the increased dosage needs. Your role is to mitigate the progression of the disease. Little did they never even suggested that people could get off the medications and reverse their diagnoses. But I say results are typical. And I see this every single day with my clients. I could go on and on about the results. So semantics aside, a vegetarian diet technically is a lacto-ovo, meaning they eat eggs and dairy, but no meat. A pescatarian usually means a vegan diet plus fish, but some people do fish plus eggs and dairy. It doesn't really matter. And I really kind of don't like to get caught up in it, even though everyone does. Like a flexitarian diet is just a euphemism for an omnivore diet. So just eat more plants, eat as healthy and as close to nature and as whole as possible, and you will have these extraordinary benefits.
I couldn't agree with you more. That is so true. And I think the problem is the semantics confuse people. And so then they go, screw it, I'm not going to deal. And so, and we're being sold such unhealthy bill of goods. It's so hard to, you don't really see healthy vegan or vegetables being sold to us on commercials, we're being sold the fast food, the junk food, the Cokes, the McDonald's, all of that. And we're being sold cheap. It's cheaper too. Unless you do your research, you can eat cheap and eat healthy. But people sometimes don't want to be bothered with that. And if you're not bothered with that, down the line, you're going to be bothered with a disease and medical bill. So you might as well start here and, not have have the knowledge up front and be preventative. But it does get confusing for people. And I think when people get confused, they back away. And
I would love to add just something to that, is that I want people to eat the healthier, unprocessed foods that are less expensive, that are easy to prepare. That's where the health benefits come in, not all these hyper-processed foods. And so I agree. It's like you want to keep it simple for people. And again, I try to get rid of all of this dogma and this like these stigmas and these stressful, like you have to eat this many I talk about macro confusion because it's another passion of mine.
I don't use numbers either.
What?
Yeah, I don't use numbers in my recommendations. I don't talk about calories. I don't have anything measured. I just think that is just getting to the minutia of it makes people, it's not sustainable for them, right? It's more,
absolutely.
It's more of what you're saying. Talk about the delicious, healthy food that they can get by eating the rainbow and how they can do that without, getting into all of the nitty gritty that's going to confuse them. Because I think that part is what chases people away, and then they don't stick with something. That's not, it's not sustainable. And what we're talking about is changing lifestyle and habits, really, right? Because, what you and I had a different lifestyle growing up, and it was habitual because food becomes something that we get used to. We get the way we eat, when we eat, and how we eat is just habitual. So we get used to that, and it's hard to break those habits. And then we kind of surround ourselves with people that are doing the same, eating the same way, and the happy hours and all of that. You don't want to, I always talk to my clients about the importance of, why do you need to fit in? Fitting out is, be you, do healthy you. Don't give in to the peer pressure. There's such a socialized thing around food, and food should be celebrated. It's just hard for people. I have a client now that it's just hard for her to go out because she looks, if she doesn't eat the chips at the table, when she's at a Mexican restaurant, because she can't eat just one, so she doesn't eat them, then they start not making fun of her, but asking, well, what's going on? You're losing weight anyway. Why can't you, and it just becomes a really difficult thing for them to be a little different than what,
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I talk about. My TED Talk was about that. It's about breaking bread. Like, food is not just diet. Like, anyone could follow a diet, and it's not just nourishment, but food is we celebrate everything around food. Absolutely. We mourn over food. Food. And I like to call it, in my last book, Choosing Out Diet, I call it the modern day trifecta of abundance. Okay. So we are biologically and biochemically and physiologically adapted to eat as much calorie as we possibly can when we come into it, so that we're safe during times of scarcity. Mm-hmm. However, there is no scarcity anymore. And we can have food delivered, junk food delivered 24/7 at our door. And so one part of it is that our biochemistry is destined to want to eat more calorie. The second part, of this trifecta is that temptation is ubiquitous. It is everywhere, nonstop. The TV, your Instagram feeds, it's just, food is everywhere. And then the third part of this trifecta is that it's normalized. It is normal to eat junk food. It is normal to overeat. It is normal to be obese at this point. Like, we've normalized obesity as well. And this is problematic. And you have to, like you said, I always say this to you, you have to be able to stand in your truth. And it is not easy. Mm-mm. And people will fight you and they will oust you. And we are tribal human beings. We need to be in tribes. It's a risk for death if you're not, from a old perspective, like the whole history. We need to be in tribes. So feeling ousted, and this is probably what I deal with most on my one-on-one clients, is dealing with everyone else, because they feel great, they're getting the results, they love their food, but everyone is trying to stop them. And that is where it takes a lot of fortitude and a lot of strength.
Yeah, and that's hard and it's difficult. And that's where people like us, because we can become advocates for them and we can become coaches and cheerleaders and something because it's hard to jump into that by yourself, and feel like you're the lone swimmer out here and everybody else is on the is on the life raft, and so, and when in fact it's actually the opposite. But so they do need an advocate, and I think that's where working with someone like you or working with a coach who understands the health benefits and the way to not normalize, to show them that isn't really, it's just a cultural thing, and that you can crowd out the bad, bring in the good, and not feel deprived and not feel like you're not fitting in, because fitting in is such a thing since childhood, and it if it's not going to serve you, why would you want to go there? You have to break it down. We're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about how does someone get started plant-based, and how, you can't just go from here and then suddenly you're here. How do you work with people? And I know you have programs and all kinds of stuff, but let's break that down, and we'll be right back after a word from one of my sponsors. Without looking at labels, do you actually know what is in the cleaning products that you use in your home? If you haven't addressed this yet, it's likely that you are spraying toxic and dangerous chemicals in your home. 3 common ingredients that you want to avoid at all costs are ammonia, fragrance, and bleach. These ingredients and chemicals can contribute to chronic respiratory problems, allergic reactions, allergies, cancer, hormonal issues, headaches, and more. So what's the solution to a healthier, clean home for your family? Teas Organics, all-purpose cleaner and room sprays. Tea's products are formulated with the power of an essential oil blend. Her all-purpose cleaner gives you a clean surface, shower, toilet, or simply just use it to spot clean or dust, and all without harsh chemicals. And to make it even better, Tea's Organics all-purpose cleaner uses 100% organic essential oils and has a sweet yet spicy herbal aroma with hints of citrus. Imagine a fresh, inviting scent and sparkling clean home that is free from toxic, potentially harmful, and cancer-causing chemicals. I use these products, and I can personally attest to all of the above. And right now, enjoy a 15% discount by applying 15DEBBI, DEBI, to your order. So check out these amazing products by Tea's Organics that are healthy for you and your home. Welcome back. Hi, everybody. We're talking plant-based diets today with my expert, Julieanna, Hever. I've got to say it right.
Forever, never,
Hever. And when I leave here, I'll never forget it, and it will always be right after that. It's always the post show. And we would love for you to join us. So if you want to call in, we're live. And if you're watching us live, we're at area code 323-524-2599. So become part of the conversation if you can, because we're going to talk about how does someone get started if they want to go plant-based. And we talked about the benefits. We talked about the stigma, behind it, and how we can kind of overcome that. But how do we get started?
Right. So again, I like to keep this super simple. So how I like to approach it is, how do you make this totally doable? First of all, most of us are creatures of habit. Most of us cycle between maybe 1 to 2 different breakfasts, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 different lunches, maybe 5 or 6 different dinners a week max. That means you only need to find 8 to 10 recipes, your new favorite recipes that you love, and start from there. However, also, we grew up eating plant-based things. We just didn't call them plant-based. Pasta primavera, bean and rice burrito, oatmeal, a fruit salad, the vegetable minestrone. There's so many things we've already eaten. Peanut butter and jelly, the old, go-to favorite. We've had plant-based meals our whole lives. So go back to what you know and love. So my goal for my clients is to find just a few recipes in their repertoire, 4 to 6, maybe 8 to 10, that they absolutely love, and then build from there. chilies. I have, I've written now 9 books. I've got hundreds of recipes, and I'm not trained to cook. So if I could do this, anyone could do this. But it's all about finding simple foods, combining them with delicious spices and herbs the way you love, so that you absolutely can't wait to eat your food. But the whole thing is, don't try to be perfect, because there literally is no such thing. Just start experimenting. And when I was doing this 18 years ago, there were a few books out there, but it was really kind of slow pickings. And, the internet was just in its infancy. So now you can Google anything, and you could find, if you say, let's say you want lasagna, you could just put whole food plant-based before the lasagna, and you will get hundreds of options. And then you just look at a recipe that you love and like, oh, this actually sounds really delicious, and I like those flavors. Try it. If you love it, this is how I started. If I loved it, I would put a little heart on it, and I put it in a little pile. If my kids loved it, it was like a double heart. And then if you don't like it, you could either modify it or just move on to the next recipe. But nowadays there are infinite combinations of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. You're gonna find tons of them that you absolutely love.
I agree. I think that, we have great resources now on ways to really quickly get a recipe of something that you love. How would you talk about, I know you're talking and you say this over and over again, to eat whole foods, not processed foods. But there is an argument for a lot of plant-based diets are processed foods, or foods that are, that come in a package that have been put together with more than just the plant. There's more ingredients in it that aren't herbs and spices and other things that wouldn't be considered necessarily nutritious for us or healthy for us. How do you work with people? How do you tell people to stay away from those and go for, the real whole foods, the real whole plant foods?
This applies across the diet spectrum. Everyone needs to consider this. It's not just for the plant-based diet. And I did not predict this 18 years ago, what was going to unfold. And like maybe 8 to 9 years into it for me, because you used to have to eat broccoli and brown rice and tofu, or you make delicious curries or whatever, soups, stews, chilies, whatever, a million delicious things, but you had to make it, or you'd have to buy simple ingredients. All of a sudden, there's all of these plant-based, like anything you could eat, I could eat vegan now. Burgers, fries, cookies, candies,
exactly.
Anything.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I didn't see that coming. We were all celebrating it at first because, you could eat this, plant-based version of it, save the animals, save the planet, which is great. And I'm a big advocate for that. But what's happening is that it has a health halo on it. Like, oh, it's vegan. So for the first time in my career, I would say maybe it's been 7-8 years that started, maybe more. People are coming to me that have been on a vegan diet for a while, and they're having very similar issues as the omnivores, which is, when I look at their food journal, always a result of the highly processed foods. If a burger isn't good for you, nor is a highly processed vegan burger. If ice cream 3 times a day isn't healthy for you, neither is the plant-based version. It's a little healthier, but it still causes problems. So across the board, no matter who I work with, I recommend using those as treat foods and focusing on the whole intact foods, because that's what's going to make you and keep you healthy. The problem is that these foods are hyper palatable, and anything where you're adding sugars and oils and flours and salts and all of those things make it taste so good. And again, it lights up our dopamine receptors, and it lights up what we're biochemically adapted to want, because It's more calorie for the smallest amount of portion. And it's very hard to, not want that stuff. Like you said, once you have that one chip, you're not going to stop. That's not you being broken. That's the food causing those reactions in your body.
Yes.
So that's what I do with my clients, is I transition them away from all of that stuff, and then their palate recalibrates, and then they feel good. So then they have that desire, because the more they do that, the more everything tastes really good, the more they really love it. It was my birthday last week. I don't even want cake. I went to all these, I've been celebrating for a couple of weeks.
Happy birthday.
I don't want ice cream. I don't want the cake. I just don't even want it anymore. And I would have never believed that would be possible if you told me this like several years ago. So
yeah, it's funny when you take out the sugar and you take out the salt and you take out any of the processed stuff out, and you give yourself enough time, because nothing happens, like I said, nothing happens overnight. You have to give it time. But when you take it out, your cravings go away, your taste buds change, and you don't want any. I have an issue with restaurants in that they oversalt everything, even the vegan ones. There's the new one in Calabasas, Crossroads. Anyway, things are just over salted and not or buttered or something that just doesn't. I'm not used to it because I've taken so out of my life for so long, and yet I see everybody around me, they're so used to it that they just eat it. It's getting a new normal for what your taste buds, and it takes time. It's like habits take time to change. So do your taste buds have to get used to this new thing.
But it doesn't take as long as people think. It can happen really quickly, especially if you dive in. You go cold tofu. You don't just kind of transition. And you just start eating whole. It's not going to taste as great at first, but then every day it gets better and better and better. But then every time you have the big dopamine hit from something hyper palatable, it brings it back and you remember. Your brain's amazing. So It is really interesting, but it can happen really quite quickly. I've seen that very, very frequently.
Yeah. And it's hard because and then there's that deprivation thing where you think you're being deprived if you can't have, deep fried French fries because they're fried in bad oil. That's considered a processed food. So, but then I have to show my clients how to have, sweet potato fries and how you can roast them and bake them and with a good
air fry them now.
And air fry them now. And they're
good.
Just as good, but you're right. The receptors go back to the deep fried and what it was like for us. And, and suddenly we're eating the whole bag. So it's difficult, but it's very doable. I have a question about what do you think? There's so much talk around gluten and gluten-free this and gluten-free that, and there's so much gluten-free out there that is still from processed. Do you think being gluten-free is for everybody? And I know where gluten comes from. I know the sensitivities that many people have to it. How do you work with your clients, and how do you deal with gluten in your practice?
So I actually wrote a book on that too, called The Complete 80s Guide to Gluten-Free Vegan Cooking. And I personally have an allergy to wheat. So what people don't even know what gluten is. Gluten is basically a protein found in mostly wheat and wheat derivatives and rye and barley and sometimes oats just due to cross-contamination. It's just a protein. It's not this evil thing that's going to tear up your body. And so the people that really need to avoid, because it's not easy, because I was gluten-free and vegan for a long time. I'm pretty much that now too. Sometimes I'm okay. It's like allergies are weird, but it's really hard to be gluten-free in this world, especially like just traveling and dining out is very, very challenging. So if you need to, you should, and you have to, especially if you have celiac disease. That's the most important population that needs to avoid gluten altogether. Mm-hmm. But then there's people that have an allergy like me, and I have, mild symptoms. Some people have very severe symptoms. I used to have severe symptoms. Allergies change. We're kind of like at the cusp of what we understand about immunology. So it's really interesting. But if you have an allergy, and then the most common thing is that people have intolerances to gluten, like a gluten sensitivity. So know thy body, know how you respond, and know what it is. But here's what my thesis is. It's not really a thesis. It's pretty what's happening. People say, oh, but I went gluten-free and I feel so good. Well, yeah, because gluten is found in so many processed foods. So if you cut out candies and cookies and cakes and all these breads and like just processed foods, of course you're going to feel better, because that's what we're talking about, is transitioning to whole foods anyway. But there's nothing really magical about giving up gluten per se. So I tell my clients who are dealing with this and trying to assess whether they have an intolerance or a sensitivity, I have them, they get it out of their diet for a little while. This is kind of the way that we do this in the dietetics world. And then give them a dose of like barley, which is a whole food, or couscous, which is a whole food version of something high in gluten. And then you'll know if you're really sensitive to gluten per se, or if you're sensitive to processed foods. Most of us are sensitive to processed foods. We just don't realize it because it's just the norm. So it's definitely overused in the media as like this thing. But that's the other thing, that now gluten-free, like vegan, has a health halo. So people think, oh, it's healthy, it's gluten-free. Doesn't mean anything. It just means it avoids that protein. So again, you want to go to the foods that are the wholest, that have the shortest ingredient lists on your, on your whatever packaging you're buying. And it's not necessarily the gluten itself. It's not poison. It's not problematic for most of the population.
So in my schooling, I was taught that gluten, or I was told that gluten, it comes from glytin, which comes from the seed of grass. And that is what is our intolerance to gluten, because humans we're not really meant to have dairy either, because let's face it, dairy's for calves, cow's milk is for calves, not for humans. But we're not meant to digest, because our digestive tract isn't like a cow who could eat grass. We can't, because they have 4 stomachs. So, and that's where our intolerance comes from, is like we are actually ingesting the seed of grass and gluten. Is that not true?
Oh, no, it's not true at all. I mean, the people that are saying that are the ones that are eating grass-fed beef because they think it's healthier than grain-fed beef. And it's like, we're going, how many derivatives away do we have to get from actually eating? We're not digesting grass. First of all, we're not. And we have a hard time digesting fiber. That's why it helps our system and makes our microbiome healthy. And it's the most important. Fiber and phytonutrients are the 2 most important nutrients of all, and they're exclusively found in plants. So wheat is a naturally formed protein found primarily in wheat, and then also barley, rye, and sometimes oats through cross-contamination. It's not processed through, it's a grain itself. And so
gluten
we're not
is, you're
eating
saying.
grass necessarily.
Gluten is, you were saying wheat. Gluten is a grain itself. Is that
gluten,
what you, yes.
No.
Okay.
Gluten is not a grain. It's a protein found in those grains.
Yeah, right.
It's important because I'm glad you asked that, because there's so much mythology out there, and it gets so complicated. And again, people get so confused that they're just like, forget it, throw in the towel. I'm going through the drive-thru. I'm going to get whatever I want.
Exactly.
And I want it to be so much more simpler than that, because it really, really, really is.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking, because there's so much confusion around it. And my other question, I guess, would be, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Stephen Gundry and his books, and the Plant Paradox, the one book that talks about the evils of lectins. Can you address that? Because then people are afraid to eat tomatoes, beans, rice, any nightshades, any vegetables that have seeds in them. What is a lectin? Why should we be afraid or not afraid? And what's that all about?
I think this person is brilliant for scamming the world. I don't know how he's been so effective, and so his microphone is so loud, and then he's making, I don't know how much money selling these crazy supplements that have no bearing on truth, nothing to do with science whatsoever. It's amazing to me. It blows my mind. So first of all, a lectin is a compound found in a lot of plant foods that have, and it's an anti-nutrient. So it minimizes absorption of certain things. Is that bad? Absolutely not. If you look at the blue zones, if you look at the healthiest populations around the world with the most centenarians, the most effective, aging populations, the one food they have in common, all of them across the world, there's 5 of them, legumes. Legumes are extraordinarily health promoting. If you look at the science on why legumes are so health promoting, or vegetables or fruits, like no one could really unseat, I don't know how he was able to, but no one could really unseat the knowledge and vast wisdom and bazillions of studies that we have. Hundreds of thousands of studies showing how health promoting fruits and vegetables and legumes and whole grains are. There is no evidence to support that lectins cause any of this nonsense that he's claiming. And it's a great marketing scam. Like, he's making tons of money because of this, but it is absolutely not based in any kind of science. We need fiber. We need phytonutrients found exclusively in these plant foods. The populations around the world that are healthiest eat the most plants. I did a book called The Vegetarian Diet, which you did great pronouncing. It was a hard
that one
pronounce.
I could pronounce. Not your name.
You did it. I know. But it's my my thesis for that book was, why is the Mediterranean diet get all of the props every year? It's like the best diet, when the plant-based diet is the only diet that's like our research, not ours, not my research, the research on that side of it shows all of the efficacy, like extraordinary health benefits, like I said before. Well, the Mediterranean diet, when we started looking at it originally, was a 90-something% whole food plant-based diet. It's just things have evolved and the marketing kind of gets out and things kind of like, it's like that game telephone. Once you say something, then by the time you get to the end, there's a million derivations of what you originally said.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's nonsense. There's nothing to be afraid of in plant foods. I mean, maybe arsenic in rice, so you want to minimize your consumption of rice, or just just do different types of rice and not have it every day. But the compounds in plants that are naturally there are health promoting. Help your microbiome, feed the good bacteria that are directly and indirectly linked to your immune function, your cardiovascular health, everything. It is everything. So you want to have fiber, you want to have phytonutrients, you want to eat more plants for optimal health.
Okay. And nightshades, any thoughts on should be eating
No
them?
evidence to, I mean, that's more of like Eastern medicine philosophy.
Okay.
But if you look at the research on those foods, they are so full of health promoting foods. I mean, that's predominantly what I eat. Not that that's just such an N of a one thing, but there's no evidence to scientifically show that nightshades are harmful for the vast majority of population. Like, people have sensitivities and intolerances again, but that's a unique individualized kind of thing to deal with. Overall, very healthy. Eat more plants. Keep it simple.
Yeah, that is the simplest way to put it, just to eat more plants. And I tell them, most of my clients are not plant-based 100%, but I always tell them, well, then go 75% on your plate and then watch the source of your animal protein, because I'm not going to change them. That they don't want to give it up, and I'm sure you have some clients or have dealt with some people like that, but at least you can, like you said, every little bit makes a difference. So just, do
well. And it took me a long time to say, no, like you can lead a human to healthy, but you can't make them eat. And you do you. There's tons of dietitians out there that will support whatever diet you want. I'm not going to try to I will not try to convince anyone to eat this way. If you want to eat this way, I will love you through the process. I will show you how and why and what, but I will not try to convince. It took me a long time to stop banging my head against the wall and trying to convince people, because food is, again, back to how deeply personal it is. Mm-hmm. You do you. If you want support and you want to see these incredible health benefits, call me up. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not going to try to convince anyone anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because it's hard. And so, but I do work with people that do eat animal products, but I'm telling them the more phytonutrients that they can get from, plants, go there. That's what 75% of your plate at least should be. Because otherwise they're not going to see change. They're not going to. Can we touch on, because we're running low on time here, can we touch on organic, buying organic, where to buy, how to buy, and then we'll talk about how people can access you and get your cookbooks and even work with you if they want. So.
Yes, thank you. I'll do it really quickly because we do have to end.
Yeah.
And I appreciate both of those things. I would just say, simply put, with organic, yes, organic is better. It's better for the planet. It's better for, less pesticide ingestion, all of that. However, it's not always accessible. It's more expensive. It's not always available. And there's a lot of research. I look at the toxicology reports showing that you are better off eating more fruits and vegetables than worrying about whether or not it's organic. So my ultimate answer to that is, if you can and when you can, choose organic. But if you can't, still eat more produce and still don't worry about it, because it's compared to what is a question not asked often enough.
Right.
And with respect to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's like the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, and you can always check those out and just know, if you're not going to go organic, here's the ones that might be better, and here's the ones you can maybe wait for the organic on, just to be overall, they don't absorb as much of the pesticides, is really what that is. What was I going to say? Let people know what you've got coming up and how they can access you and get your books and all of that, because I'm sure you're such a wealth of information that people, I'm sure, could benefit from.
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, well, you can find me at plantbaseddietitian.com, and on there you can have all my social media outlets. I'm on all those social media channels. I think I'm on Facebook as Plant-Based Dietitian, on Instagram as my name, Julieanna Hever, and you can find me on plantbaseddietitian.com as everything. All my books are there. My books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and wherever you can buy books. And I love answering questions online. I also have a group starting on Monday. So if you want to transition, it's a 21-day challenge. Proven techniques, like people have extraordinary results in just 21 days. So join me there, plantbaseddietitian.com. And I really appreciate you having me on, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your time and your energy and your expertise. And I'm going to have you leave us with a final thought right now. One final thought, word of wisdom, anything. It could be a word, a phrase, anything you want to leave us with.
Choose you now. Every bite matters.
I love that title, Choose You Now, meaning nothing more important than you, and what you put in your body is everything. Julieanna, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to connecting with you again. And you, my audience, thank you for your time. Please reach out, ask us a question, make a comment. We'll keep the conversation going. And in the meantime, remember to keep going out and finding those conversations that connect to a healthier you. Bye, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.